So, in this video, we're going to see Trump's OMB Director Russell Vought casually admit to plans for illegal budget maneuvers and then deflect with a truly unhinged rant about cocaine dogs and DEI. Let's watch the full clip and then I'll give you my thoughts at the end.
Fed officials met this week to set interest rates. Trump, the president, has said that he believes Powell will, quote, do the right thing and lower interest rates soon. If Powell does not lower interest rates, will President Trump be tempted to fire him, and can he?
Well, I think the president's been very clear about that. He says he has no intention of firing the Fed chairman. He is putting his viewpoints out there with regard to what interest rates should be, which is dramatically lower than where they are. And of course, we were up there visiting the renovations and kind of getting a firsthand look ourselves for the extent to which it's been mismanaged. It's a host of issues with regard to the Fed. They've gone negative in terms of a profit loss over the last several years. We don't get those remittances into the federal treasury. We believe on a host of fronts, Chairman Powell has been too late, and the president is doing what a president should do, which is get out there and articulate the views on behalf of the American people.
Do you not have any concerns with all this back and forth? And I realize it's not unprecedented for a president to speak about what they want in terms of the interest rates, although this is probably taking it to a new level. But do you not have any concerns with all this back and forth about firing Powell, about the concept or the perception of undermining the independence of the Fed, which therefore could then undermine confidence that global investors have in the United States? As you know, the idea of an independent federal bank is an important part of that.
No, in fact, I think the patience that the president has demonstrated towards Chairman Powell is in fact a defense of that independence. You had Secretary Bessent out there talking about the independence of the Fed, but we also have to articulate the views of the American people and the president with regard to needing lower interest rates and not having a large-ass monstrosity on the National Mall. So there's a lot of things that need to occur. And again, the Fed isn't independent with regard to its regulatory affairs. It's supposed to go through the cost-benefit analysis that all so-called independent agencies go through. They are not doing that. And so these are the kinds of things we have to do to make sure that these issues are understood and made aware to the country.
Republicans in Congress approved President Trump's request to cancel $9 billion in already appropriated foreign aid and $1 billion for public broadcasting. It's called a recisions package. Is the Trump administration going to attempt another recisions package, and what would you target if so?
We're very open to it. The president will make a decision on that in the weeks ahead. But we have a lot of cuts that we've found. Department of Government Efficiency, we've sent many of those reductions up to the Hill in terms of our fiscal year 26 budget. We're taking a look as to the extent to which there are unspent fiscal year 25 funds. We're also going through a review, and sometimes we may not rescind it. This last week we released billions of dollars in education funding. It took us longer because many of those programs we have fundamental concerns with because they go to left-wing advocacy groups, and it took us a long time to make sure that they were consistent with presidential EOs. We were able to release those in time for the school year, even though they're multi-year funds. And so each funding program is different. We'll be looking at that, but we are very open. We had a very good vote in the House and the Senate. But again, there's a debate right now on Congress as to the extent to which these things upset the appropriations process. We do not believe they do. We think that the rescissions bills, in fact, make the appropriations process work and allow taxpayers to receive some dividend for the fact that we're $37 trillion in debt. But it's a push and pull that we're going through over the next several weeks.
I want to ask you about that in a second, but before I do, there are reports that you're considering using something called a pocket rescission, which is essentially allow the White House to run out the clock to sidestep Congress weighing in on additional spending cuts. Democrats say that's illegal, you can't do it. Is this a tool you're going to use?
It's very possible that we might use pocket rescissions. It's one of our executive tools. It's been used before. The General Accounting Office, which we're not a big fans of, has said it was legal in the 1970s. And now, so Congress has come along and said, hey, we have concerns with it. It is a fully legal approach to being able to use the Impoundment Control Act, another law we're not too big fans of, to use that to be able to send up a rescissions bill later in the year and be able to have it just evaporate at the end of the fiscal year.
You said possible, but it sounded like you were about to say likely.
No, we're definitely looking at it. We're looking at all options. I've said on every one of these shows, nothing is taken off the table for us to be able to deal with the deficits that we have.
In addition to Murkowski skeptical of this, you need Democratic votes to keep the government open in a vote coming up in September. Are you worried at all about blowing up the appropriations process? We've already heard Democrats say we can't, their perspective is we enter into a back and forth, we get an appropriations bill, and then the Trump administration comes in and undermines the concessions that we got, and it just blows up the whole thing.
No, we're not worried about that at all. Obviously, the introduction of recisions is new muscle memory, but it's something that recisions were done very commonly 70s, 80s, the first part of the 90s. So this is not something the appropriations process has never handled before. Look, the appropriators want a scenario where we propose cuts and they use that in their bills to then pay down for higher levels of spending. We're $37 trillion in debt. We actually have to have $1 of cut go to $1 of deficit reduction. Mm-hmm. That's really what this is about. And we ultimately think it makes the appropriations process work better because you can then have bipartisan votes on top line levels. And if an agency comes along and says, look, we're finding waste and garbage that the taxpayers wouldn't want to spend, then we can send those up for recisions.
Even with the deficit, addressing the deficit in this new bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the debt is still projected to climb $25 trillion over the next 10 years. And there's some criticism from conservatives at the Manhattan Institute, for example, saying that DOGE is just what they call spending cut theater, going after, quote, culture war totems. Their argument is basically, if you really wanted to cut spending, if you really wanted to get the deficit and the debt under control, you should be going after bigger areas such as the defense budget. What's your response to that criticism?
I think it's unfair criticism. I think you got to take a multifaceted approach. The One Big Beautiful Bill reduces deficits. It had $1.5 trillion in mandatory reforms. Those are the structural programs.
But the GAO and the CBO says it's going to actually increase the deficit.
No, CBO was using artificial baselines that treat spending as eternal and tax relief that was in law since 2017 to be temporary. And so if you adjust for that, and the bill does have additional tax relief, of which we paid for with spending reductions, this bill reduces deficits and will help us with the national debt. Overall, the moves that we are making as an economic team under President Trump's leadership will lead to about a third of what's necessary to balance the budget, given the numbers that you just articulated. Mm-hmm. That's just in our 6 months. When you talk about the tariff revenues that are coming in, $3 trillion, CBO believes the same numbers that we have. And again, those are in advance of a number of the trade agreements that we're talking about over the next several weeks. So we're making big moves, and I think the country is going to come alongside of us and see the progress that we're making.
Quickly, if you could, I want to ask you about some medical research funding that the White House is withholding right now from the National Institutes of Health. 14 Republican senators say you're risking, quote, undermining critical research and, quote, could threaten Americans' ability to access better treatments. Will you allow that funding to go through at the NIH?
We're going through the same programmatic review of the NIH that we did on education funding. So NIH is a program that if they were a company that went through the last pandemic, their stock prices would be in shambles. I mean, they fundamentally mismanaged and in some respects caused the pandemic by their own research for gain-of-function research. Now, put that aside for a second. Now you have waste, fraud, and abuse of funding, injecting dogs with cocaine and studying the impacts of it, giving money to Harvard to study lizards being blown off of branches by leaf blowers. Every step of the way, you have fundamental DEI across the board. There's literally
I don't think that's what the Republican senators are
You literally have an
about.
entire institute that does nothing more than DEI research at NIH.
You think that's what the Republican senators want funding for?
What I'm suggesting is that we have fully funded all important research through our budget proposal. We will continue to make sure that funding goes out, but we're going to do everything we can to make sure that NIH is not weaponized and wasteful against the American people.
Okay, so there's a lot there. I mean, honestly, where do you even start with that? The whole thing is just, it's this masterclass in saying the quiet part out loud and then wrapping it in the most baffling, just bizarre justifications. He starts with the Fed, right? And Jake Tapper asks a pretty straightforward question about undermining the Federal Reserve's independence. And this guy, Vought, with a completely straight face, says, I think the patience that the president has demonstrated towards Chairman Powell is in fact a defense of that independence. I had to rewind that. Did I hear that right? The constant public attacks, the threats, the tweets, the pressure campaigns, that's a defense of independence now? I mean, what world are we living in? It's just, it's pure doublespeak. He's essentially saying that by constantly threatening someone, you're defending their ability to act freely? It makes absolutely no sense. It's intimidation, plain and simple. And then he gets to the budget stuff, the recisions, and he just comes right out and admits they're looking at something called a pocket rescission. He's so casual about it. It's very possible that we might use pocket rescissions. And what is that? It's a way for the White House to just run out the clock on funding that Congress has already approved. Like, Congress does its job, they pass a budget, they appropriate money for specific things, and the White House can just say, you know what? Nah, we don't like that program, so we're just gonna sit on the money until it expires. He calls it a fully legal approach. It's not, he's openly talking about a way to unilaterally overrule the legislative branch to just bypass Congress entirely. That's the whole point of having a Congress. They have the power of the purse. But he's just like, yeah, it's one of our executive tools. No, that's not a tool. That's breaking a fundamental part of how the government is supposed to work. And the justification is always, oh, the debt. We're $37 trillion in debt. Okay, but then when Tapper points out that their own big bill is projected by the CBO, the official scorekeeper, to increase the debt, what does he do? He says the CBO uses artificial baselines. Of course. The referee is always wrong when you don't like the score, isn't it? It's unbelievable. They just dismiss any fact, any data that gets in their way. But the end, my God, the end of the interview, that was something else. Tapper asks him about withholding funding for the National Institutes of Health, funding that, by the way, Republican senators want released. And Vought just completely short circuits. He doesn't answer the question. Instead, he launches into this gish gallop of every right-wing grievance you can imagine. He blames the NIH for the pandemic, which is an insane conspiracy theory. Then he starts rattling off these talking points you see on Fox News. Injecting dogs with cocaine. Lizards being blown off of branches. And then the big one, of course, DEI. You literally have an entire institute that does nothing more than DEI research. He's talking about the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities. That's what he's talking about. He's just rebranding it with a scary acronym to justify defunding research into why, certain diseases affect minority communities differently. He's holding up critical medical research that could develop treatments and save lives because of what? Some decontextualized stories about animal studies and his political obsession with DEI. It's completely unhinged. It's a tantrum. It's not a policy argument. Honestly, listening to all that, you realize what? The game island, all the talk about the debt and government efficiency. It just feels like cover. The real goal here seems to be about accumulating power and punishing their perceived enemies. They want to control the economy by bullying the Fed. They want to control the budget by ignoring Congress. And they want to control science by defunding anything that touches on a subject they don't like. He laid the whole authoritarian playbook out on national television, and he didn't even seem to think there was anything wrong with it. It's chilling, really. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. While you're down there, hit the like button and subscribe. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.